In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in Black and White emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and happy Veterans Day to all the veterans out there today. This is another episode of America in Black and White, and I am your host, Charles King. Tonight, our special guest is Mr. Reginald Reggie Williams. Reginald is a strategic advisor, educator, and entrepreneur with more than 15 years of experience driving growth across the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. As a founder and CEO of Oak Lane, Reggie partners with C suite leaders to design scalable business strategies, lead organizational transformation, and unlock new revenue opportunities through innovative planning and market positioning. He has advised nationally recognized organizations, including the City of Boston, the Equality Fund, Give Black, Alliance, United Way of Massachusetts Bay, Eras Corporation, and Innovative at BU. His career spans leadership roles in corporate innovation and government affairs at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, strategic communications at the Massachusetts Budget and Policy Center, and fundraising strategy at the Transformative Culture Project. Currently pursuing his doctorate at NYU Steinhardt, Reggie's research explores leadership, innovation, and workforce development. He also holds a master's in public policy from Tufts University, where he served as a leader and faculty advisor at the Derby Entrepreneurship Center. A longtime advocate for inclusive growth and creative economies, Reggie has held board and advisory roles with Mass Creative, the Democ Center, and BAMS Fest. His work reflects a deep commitment to building equitable systems, fostering innovation, and empowering communities through education, strategy, and culture. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Reginald Williams. Hello, sir.
Charles, thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here. Happy Veterans Day to all of the veterans in our communities, and thank you again for this opportunity.
Oh, yes, sir. Is there anything you'd like to add to your bio before we get into the show?
No, I think
Yeah.
I think that about covers it. I'm really excited to dive into tonight's conversation.
Well, thank you. Look, we'll start first where I'd like for people to get an understanding, and you tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurship in Oak Lane. Can you tell us what inspired you to launch Oak Lane?
Sure. So Oak Lane actually started as a pandemic venture that I named Our Strategy. As a pandemic entrepreneur, we were dealing with such market disruption where businesses, nonprofits were really struggling and thinking through how they could really pivot and grow and sustain their efforts over time. When folks kept asking me for advice around how they could potentially pivot or sustain some of their nonprofit ventures, having worked here in the greater Boston ecosystem for over a decade at the time, around helping businesses launch, scale, and grow their efforts. I said, hey, you know what? I can actually lean into my entrepreneurship journey myself. I've done this type of advising on a one-on-one basis. I've worked with leaders around their efforts. Why not take my journey seriously as well and see what I can do? So Our Strategy started as really an effort where an hour of my time was an hour of yours. And as you can imagine in the market, hourly work is something that is really dicey depending on the industry that you're in. So after working and advising some organizations for a couple of years, I decided to reincorporate my business as Oak Lane. And oak lane means it really represents not only having deep roots, so thinking about the roots of an oak tree, but helping business owners and leaders find different lanes and opportunities and connective tissues to really think about challenges differently. And we do that through this framework called design thinking, which is really just about taking people centered approaches to solving these problems head on. So after 5 years now of operating this business and leveraging my work experience, I'm really excited to be able to partner with some of the organizations that you mentioned, so with small business owners, and then also some social impact leaders around what transformation needs to look like and how we can really sustain businesses over time.
Wow. So in that name, does that name also mean anything personal to you? Because in thinking about an oak tree being rooted deep into the ground and how it grows,
Yeah.
what's the personal part of that?
For me, Oak Lane really represents a returning to home and a returning to self. And when I think about the roots of entrepreneurship, they run deep in my family. My mother is a master cosmetologist and a business owner who's been operating her business for over 20 years here in the greater New England area. I have family members like my grandfather also on my father's side served as an entrepreneur as well. And when I think about the different roots and the heritage and the legacy that I carry forward as an entrepreneur, helping to make sure that those coming behind me, like my younger siblings, have opportunities to explore what their entrepreneurial journeys can look like. It is really about devising those different lanes and thinking about what access to opportunity can look like and being able to really see the forest for the trees. That's often something that I say. So I think outside of all the tree metaphors, I won't get too deep into the weeds with that. But Oak Lane really it represents that return to self, that return to home, and the roots that I carry forward in my journey on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, wow. So how does Oak Lane differentiate itself from other consulting firms?
There are a lot of consulting firms, and that's a great question. A lot of consulting firms in the market that focus on marketing and communications. And I think we've all heard the expression that says that there's nothing new under the sun. Most small businesses are not actually innovating or doing something that is completely new and novel. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, close to 90, if not 95% of small businesses have a different iteration of what an existing product or service offering is looking like in the market. So I gave the example of my mother's hair salon, for example, or a barber shop. Their barbershops are a dime a dozen. Hair salons can be a dime a dozen. But how are you differentiating yourself in the market? For us at Oak Lane, we focus on revenue operations. So we look at revenue, sales, and customer success through design thinking as a way that in which we really work to co-create solutions with our partners. And we see ourselves as growth partners for our clients. So we really work deeply with them and advising them on their challenges and how we can really test and iterate and refine the solutions over time so that we get the competitive intelligence needed to be successful, as well as making sure that they have the support needed to really bring those solutions to market.
Run us through that process. How does that look just on just on an example basis from beginning to end? What does that look like?
So what I like to say is that often when people come to us, they think that they might have a problem with their dishwasher, but they actually don't realize that they have a plumbing problem. So what we do is we start by taking a really I'm going to say comprehensive, but it depends on capacity, and it also depends on our clients, not only their capacity but their ability really to dive deeper into those issues. So we start by taking a really exhaustive look at what the challenges are. So going back to like a website design example. So we'll start by saying like, okay, so what's your existing website platform? What are your goals for your website? Do you know who your audiences are? Do you have a game plan around what your marketing strategy needs to look like? And then as we get a little bit further into working to unpack and really define the problem which they've came to us for, we work to really come up with some potential solutions based off of what that initial take looks like. So they might say, hey, you know what, I'm looking to convert more leads into actual closed business, or I'm looking to launch a new product or service. Based off of that, they really need the opportunity also to really come up with some, I think, the larger suite of potential solutions in the universe, map those things out against what their actual business strategy looks like. And that's where we get to the differentiation around, you think that you might have this one type of problem, but actually when you open up your aperture, you open up the lens, you're able to see that you have a much larger opportunity at hand. But it starts by knowing what's going on with your business as well as with your opportunity. And then from there, we focus on one kind of narrow scope to get started, and then we see where we can go from there.
Well, I guess the good thing is it sounds like you're saying that you guys are not a cookie cutter. And so basically you customize based on the client. And so when a client comes to you, I guess you have to do that whole forensic scalable thing to, to dive deep and get all the data, and then you put it in the machine and file, here we go, this what we got.
Yeah, it takes the discovery process is interesting because we definitely dive deep into, okay, so like here's what we heard and here's what we think that you might need to go with. And that process is one really from stemming from design thinking. It's really about falling in love, as I said earlier, with the problem. And I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of small business owners and leaders, while they have an idea around what they're looking for in terms of business transformation and growth, they don't often know what the actual steps are to get there. So helping people reverse engineer those steps based off of the ideal state. So where are you trying to go? What are you looking to do in the market? And what's the time frame of that change? Okay, great. Let's scale it back and say, what can we do within the first 30, 60, 90 days? What does success look like in the next 6 to 12 months? And I think that, especially at this time in the market, there's so much up in the air. You need to be nimble and you need to be able to adjust and pivot in real time. So keeping our eyes on that prize, but being flexible about how we get there. That's a part of where, you got to come in. Sometimes you got to throw a different play in, like things on the court, things on the field aren't looking like you think they might be looking. It's time to shift a bit, but keep closing the feedback loop so that you know what you're doing with your business resources, what's working, what's not, and how you can bring that that institutional knowledge forward for your members of your team and for your clients and your work overall.
Mhm. So, what's the most challenging aspect of being a founder?
Ooh. Charles, I don't know how much time we have. Um, I think for me, the hardest or the most challenging part of being a founder is balancing wearing all of the hats. I've seen these videos on Instagram where folks will be having staff meetings with themselves, where it's like, like from the chief revenue officer to the chief marketing officer to the accountant to the bookkeeper to the social media person. It is a lot of different hats to wear, and I think that my skill set and the learnings that I had from working with social impact programs, working in policy, working in healthcare innovation, they gave me good glimpses into some of the nuggets and the gems that I needed to learn to be successful in doing the work that I do today. But there's also a lot that I don't know. And, having a real effort and lens around how to continue education, how to continue learning, how to continue staying fresh in the market, it makes our solutions better. I have a really great team that I'm fortunate enough to work with and to lean on, so they fill gaps that I may have. But it is really a balancing act, and I think that, like in that vein of having to wear all of the hats, decision fatigue around what to focus on can be very easy as a founder because you need to focus on all of the things. You need to focus on growth. You need to focus on lead gen. You need to focus on sales. You need to focus on closing deals. But that's also very different than the back end administrative work of running a business, tax filings, accounting and bookkeeping. So knowing when to bring in support and when to bring in the right folks to help you grow and scale is something that I've been really fortunate over this season to be continuing to invest in.
So, can you share a success story where Oak Lane transformed an organization?
Ooh. I think in terms of business transformation for an organization, um, a lot of our clients are in different industries. So it's interesting thinking about what transformation can look like for, let's say, higher ed versus a nonprofit. One of our clients who we did a design project with, it was really exciting to have the chance to work with them on the back end of revamping their website and their communications. As small teams, we come in as growth partners to really help these organizations work on what the baseline communications need to look like. So thinking through what your marketing strategy needs to look like, maybe emails, newsletter, and then being able to take and help them develop those assets. It was really powerful to have a client tell us that not only was their redesigned theory of change something that was really successful in terms of helping them secure a multi-year commitment for some of their efforts, but also just to see the true joy in the actual point of contact around what making these assets look like for them in terms of actually having the materials that spoke cleanly to their work, how they're working to transform communities, and what that looks like to be able to help scale impact across their industry. And when I think about that, that work is really, it means everything to me to be able to really support folks and meet them where they're at and help them tell a better story. We focus on systems, storytelling, and strategy as our focus on revenue operations, and that's just one example. When I think about some of like our work in higher education, we just got done producing innovate at BU's Student Innovation Conference, IdeaCon, which is the largest cross-college student innovation conference in the nation, and working to make sure that students from diverse backgrounds, non-traditional students have opportunities to exposure to what such a large student innovation gathering looks like in terms of networking, in terms of pitching and bringing an idea to light. It means everything to have access to opportunity. And I think that that's what a lot of our work focuses on, helping folks see the access to the opportunity that they have in front of them.
So, how do you balance innovation with practicality in entrepreneurship?
How do I balance innovation with practicality in entrepreneurship?
Hmm.
I think for me, balancing innovation and practicality looks like having a true foot on the I'll say a true thumb on the needle around what innovation needs to look like. And I think that often folks can see innovation as this really big thing that needs to happen. So like we'll say innovation with a capital I versus innovation just with, a lowercase I. Like so
Okay.
moving from just using a spreadsheet to actually implementing a system like a MailChimp or maybe a CRM like HubSpot can be that innovation that you need to be able to automate some of your processes to save time and to help you do business a bit better. But people think that innovation needs to look like going from here to the moon overnight. It doesn't. Innovation starts within each of us as individuals, and it really comes down to the mindset that I mentioned earlier of being able to take a step back, assess what's working, assess what's not, and then come up with some ideas that you can test over time. That for me gets into where practicality comes in, being able to say, hey, you know what, we're not going to be able to do everything this quarter. And that is okay. Or you know what, we had to launch this product and actually that product was it was a chop, it was a fail, it was a flop, and that's okay too. Failure is okay. It's a part of the process. How you take the learnings forward and how you move forward from there to help develop an action plan and a game plan and carrying that institutional knowledge forward is really the work. And that's what practicality looks like. We're not going to bat 1,000% every time that we're at the plate, but that doesn't mean that we can't be successful in taking those learnings and improving our game over time.
So I heard you mention MailChimp. So you guys train businesses to use CRM systems as well?
We've done some of that advising, yes, and I think that those types of advising engagements are ones that they also come with a lot of learnings for us because as you think about our depth and knowledge base on systems like MailChimp or Canva, the amount of time and the amount of attention it takes to really help folks onboard and set those systems up for success, it really requires longer term engagements than what some of our clients initially anticipate. And I think that as we've worked through that process of learning just what our clients need and how to meet them at the depth and at the scope of where they're at, we're able to create some training. So we created like some videos to help kind of train and walk folks through those systems. But it's up to us as individuals to really go in and to do the actual work in the system. And that's where it gets to business transformation when it becomes a part of your processes, a part of your standard operating procedures. And you know that you have from A to F, you have these 6 things, these 6 steps that you do to get from that initial point of contact into your system and that you're following up and tracking it through that system.
Oh wow. So well, tell us this. Like, what is your engagement? Like in the communities with the small businesses and companies that are around you, or some of the people around you. What's the community engagement like for your company, and how do people see Oakland?
That's a great question. In terms of community engagement, so we're a member of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. We work with some of the local chambers of commerce around training and supporting entrepreneurs and being successful. As I mentioned, we work with some higher education institutions and we have some nonprofit and some small business clients. And a lot of those client engagements come from what the backgrounds of myself and my team members have, having worked across these industries. And I think really, as is for most business in general, it's about networking and about relationships. So how you're able to sustain your relationships with folks over time, share your learnings and your knowledge with them, and create really, I'd say like a learning exchange and community has been really helpful. Um, from my days in fundraising, I think back to like donor touch points where it's like you've got to have 7 or 8 touch points with folks before you can set them up for an ask if you need to ask them for a grant or ask them for some sponsorship dollars. A lot of that work is very transactional. What I'd like to think is that folks see Oak Lane as truly a growth partner. So we're not just looking to do business we do just for the sake of doing business. We want to see you be successful in the long haul, because as you're working with us to implement the solutions or the frameworks that we're helping you develop, we want to also come back and see how they're working for you. We want to make sure that you have what you need, that you have the understanding, and that the scope of the frameworks and the context matches your needs, so that it's a win-win for both of us. And I think that that's also a part of our differentiator, where some folks will just set you up and hand things off. I like to make sure that we circle back and say, hey, like, how's this going for you in November, December 2025? What are things looking like in March 2026? So having those quarterly, biannual touch points with folks just to see, hey, how are you doing? How is this working for you? And how have you been able to implement these solutions over time? How have you adapted them? Because, what we started with isn't necessarily what we need in the long haul, but it's the bridge to get us there. So it's nice to be able to circle back, as I said, and have those conversations and touch points with partners to see what's working.
So what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs of color?
In terms of advice for aspiring entrepreneurs of color, I would say start. When I think about rates of starting businesses, a lot of businesses start, but not many businesses are surviving that first 2 to 5 year failure rate. And it's because, as we think about the ideas that we had when we initially started a business, we might be holding on too hard to those initial ideas versus changing and pivoting with time and energy after really evaluating what's working well with business and what's not. You've got to be hard, as I said earlier, stubborn about the goal, but flexible about the means. So thinking about what the ultimate end goal needs to look like for your business, it's an opportunity for you to really iterate. So you might start off and think that you need to have let's say a tech venture. You might think that you need to start the next, I'll use ChatGPT and AI as an example, because AI is now a dime a dozen. You need to have the next GPT on the market. Maybe not. Maybe you need to actually look at OpenAI solutions and see what products they have and how you might be able to customize or tweak something so that you don't need to start from scratch, but you're able to reach the goals that you're looking to reach with your product or your service offering. When we think about the success rates of businesses in terms of actually getting over some of the venture capital and the capital to access challenges that they have, developing relationships with folks. So I think about the local banks, the folks that are in the financial services industry who have opportunities and training for entrepreneurs to be successful. There's a lot of free game out there where, between YouTube University and between some of these programs that are sponsored by public and private partnerships, there's a lot of opportunity, but you have to be willing to go out there, be new at something, be willing to learn, and just put yourself out there. I'd say that's the main thing. Folks don't know what you need unless you ask. So being willing to say, hey, I'm looking to do this. Would you be willing to support in a conversation, just an exploratory conversation, a coffee chat, to get some feedback, to get some inspiration, and to get some validation that your idea is actually one worth starting, or one worth that, with that tweak, it could be the next big thing. It can make all of the difference.
So how do you measure success as an entrepreneur beyond revenue?
How do I measure success as an entrepreneur beyond revenue? I think for me, success really lies in what we're able to help people achieve, and achieving the willingness to see yourself as an entrepreneur, to see your value in the market, to see that your skill set is one that folks will hire and will work with, is something that's really powerful for me, because I think of that as a leader. It's really important for us to make sure that the people that we work with and the people that we're bringing up have what they need to be successful. And often a number of the folks on my team and a number of folks that we work with in community have been asked to, as millennials, to be the most educated generation in the nation in our history, but to not get their fair share of the market. I know so many folks who are looking for opportunities to do side projects to bring in additional income. And when we think about folks not having that space to think about really where to get their start, being able to partner with folks and help them see their zone of genius. So thinking through what you could potentially do and offer, helping them draw those tissues so that they can see how their skills are transferable. So maybe you didn't work in sales before, but if you have had to upsell products in some capacity, you might have a sales background that you're not really leaning on, but you have to be able to, as I said earlier, see the forest for the trees. So helping folks see that forest and kind of wade through it so that they can get to the other side is how one of the ways in which I measure success. And I think the other way that I measure success is really, um, it's really contingent upon really deciding that success doesn't have to look like a 10x growth moment overnight. For me, it's a marathon, not a sprint. How I started my business to where my business is now, things look a little different. And I know that I wanted to bring folks in because I didn't want to have to do everything by myself. I didn't want to just be a solopreneur. It's lonely, working on all of these, wearing all of those different hats that I mentioned on your own. So being able to be in a predicament where I'm able to work with really talented people to help them see their zones of genius, as I said, and then bring real innovative solutions to light. It makes all the difference for me. And I'm excited to see what we can do in the next 5, 10, 20 years, God willing, to continue supporting businesses and leaders in reaching success for themselves.
So, how do you help that one entrepreneur that decided he or she wanted to just start their business, which to them, and what you can see, that's a successful venture in the beginning. How do you help them get to that next level?
Yeah. I think it really starts with mapping out the foundation of what they're looking to achieve and what that foundation needs to look like from an infrastructure perspective. Because when I think about, I'm trying to think of some examples that are really apples to apples. So going back to like the barbershop that I mentioned earlier, as a barber, you work and own your own book of business. So how you get clients, how you close those cuts, you got to make sure that your edges are crisp, that you got your T-bars right. You got to make sure that you are doing what needs to be done in the chair. But that's also different than also thinking about marketing your services. So making sure that you're doing the highlight reels of a good cut, that you're getting the testimonials. That's one particular type of business. When we think about entrepreneurs in general, a lot of folks have a lot of ideas that they think about bringing to the market, but if they haven't done the research around what solutions exist, taking that initial stab at actually doing the research, getting a sense of what exists in the market, what the market opportunity looks like. So how many customers or clients that you might have in this particular area that you can serve, and then what are some of the opportunities and the hurdles that you need? So what are the certifications that you might need? What type of insurance? It's different if you're a food-based business versus like a med spa. There's so many different lanes in which people can take. It's really about helping folks just kind of map out what those core building blocks are. And then from there, you start to stack them up. So, you've got the baseline research. Great. We've taken that research from discovery. Now we're going to layer on what the steps are. Now that you've got the steps mapped out, what are the next things that you need to do versus what are the things that you need support on to be successful? And how do we make sure that you keep layering those things on one step at a time and keep closing those feedback loops so that you know what's working, what's not, so you don't end up in a predicament where you might have gotten too far down a road and you realize that you didn't have the right licensure and then you end up in trouble. And we're not attorneys nor financial service advisors. We don't do any of that type of advising. We really focus on what the marketing, on the communications, and on the strategy can look like for folks to be successful, and refer them to partners who have the expertise and the credentials to do the things that we do.
So, what role does mentorship play in your entrepreneur journey?
Mentorship has played a truly tremendous role in my entrepreneurship journey. As a young person, I remember working at the hair salon that my mother worked at before she opened her salon. And I started out folding towels, answering phones, and being able just to learn a little bit about what opening and closing a register looked like, learning how to professionally have a conversation. And when I think about how that has really set and laid the foundation for the work that I do today, I think about how I can continue to make sure that I'm supporting and providing those opportunities to the next generation. It's something that over the course of my career, I've worked with young people. I started out in a program teaching young people digital media and video production as a workforce development model. So my first job, I never would have thought I'd be using cameras to tell stories and work to counter narratives around what Black and brown communities look like. Those foundational skill sets gave me the storytelling chops to continue telling stories just like we're doing right now, 20 years later, and thinking about what narratives need to look like in communities, particularly at a time like this. The real difference is that we have so much access. We have telephones that are computers in our hands now. We've got AI and language learning models processing more data deep fake, AI, there's so many different things going on, but making sure that folks have the literacy, the understanding around what opportunity looks like for them, what the systems and the tools that they need to be successful can look like, are things that we are excited to have chance to have some interns at Oak Lane to support, to being able to make sure that folks have exposure to those opportunities, so that they can really grow over time. And I think that mentorship is a two-way street. So when I think about the sponsors and the folks who have elevated and brought my name into opportunities, which has helped open up doors for our team, I wouldn't be where I am today without those folks, those individuals who have consistently seen and believed in my ability, who have pushed me in ways in which I needed to grow, where I might have been a little resistant at the time. We could say that for another day, but I've really, I've learned a lot and I've grown a lot because of having mentors and sponsors who have been willing to see, the opportunity that existed within me and to see what potential existed within me. And I'm really grateful for that.
Oh, wow. How do you approach risk taking in
Oh,
business?
risk taking. That's interesting. When I think about risk, there's risk management is something that companies do on a day-to-day basis to make sure that as they're thinking about opportunities in the market, that they're not stepping too far in the wrong direction or moving too far off of what growth and success looks like for them based off of their objectives and the key performance indicators, the KPIs that they set for themselves. When I think about risk, it's something that needs to be taken on a calculated basis. So you've got to weigh the pros and cons. You need to make sure that you have an understanding of what happens if you do this, what happens if you don't, and you got to think about the opportunity cost too. So starting a business, it doesn't take much to start a business, but depending on how you start a business, you might be set up where you have different types of accounting and filing that you need to do versus doing it in a particular way. You've got to weigh out those costs. What works for you? How do you make sure that you have what you need to be successful? Um, you got to talk to some folks and make sure that you've got the right counsel on board to be successful with that. And when we think about the long-term implications of that, one thing that it's interesting, I've had conversations with some folks around is like the length of business and the time frame. So, they say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So if you don't start on paper, you don't have the the business longevity. You don't have the start date, the EIN. It makes it difficult when you want to apply for like a line of credit or maybe a credit card for your business or a business account. You want to make sure that you're doing things in the right steps so that as you're building out those steps, as you're building out your business, you have the right steps in place and you've taken the right actions to be successful. And that's what risk is. You've got to take calculated steps towards progress and measure what's working and what's not. Um, Closed mouths don't get fed. So you gotta, not everything's going to be a win. So you also have to, swing and see what's working. And if it doesn't work, you take those learnings and then you apply them for the next round.
What's next for Oak Lane in the coming years?
Oak Lane in the coming years. That's a great question, Charles. I'm really excited to see what Oak Lane's growth trajectory looks like based off of some of um, the recent projects that we've been working on. So, in terms of working more with intermediaries, so individuals who are convening and working to support business owners and leaders around what growth and transformation and storytelling looks like, is something that's really exciting. And when I think about what that looks like in 2025. 2030 could look very different based off of how quickly things have progressed in this year. So when we think about what artificial intelligence and what these new systems have done to really transform how people are coding, to transform how they're building websites, to transform how they're telling stories. Will we be AI avatars having this conversation at one point? I don't know. I'd like to keep the human element as much as I can, but I'm never going to say never. We're excited to continue deepening our partnerships with folks on a local and on a national basis to provide these types of services to partners who are looking for business transformation or advisory that can really help them grow and scale. And I'd love to see what this work looks like on an international basis over time as well. There's so many different sources of inspiration that we have in the world. And I think that, being in New England, being in this market, we have a lot of resources. how can we take best practices and learn from others in different markets to bring new solutions to light? And that's something that, in terms of a listening tour and being hyper local, as one of my mentors would say, being able to, get outside with purpose and continue connecting and growing and developing alongside folks is something that I'm excited for. And seeing what scaling this practice looks like is something that I'm excited to see what it looks like on the other side of that. And I'm excited to see who I am on the other side of that as well.
Hmm. Okay. Well, so as we think about, your entrepreneurship and what you're doing here at Oak Lane, let's go a little bit deeper here into you as a business advisor, as well as the consulting work that you do, because I'm sure that they're hand in hand, mutually exclusive. But I'm sure there's some separatism that goes into that makes all of this work. And let's start with this. What's your first step? What's the first step you take when advising a new client?
The first step that I take when advising a new client is scoping out what the challenge is. So we start with a discovery. So we start with discovery. So really, if you're looking for fundraising support, if you're looking for marketing support, if you're looking for really just more business strategy and advising, starting by just getting a sense of what's actually working. How do we get here? And then what you're looking to do is how we do it. I don't know. You probably can maybe see this over my shoulder. I love post-it. So no, okay. Love post-it. So thinking through how we can make sure that we map these things out, and then I kind of move these pieces around like checkers or on a chessboard, so that way we can kind of group and draw some parallels around what we're hearing, and making sure that from there that we're hearing those things correctly from the context of the business owner, and then taking a deeper dive from there into what their growth opportunity would look like in an ideal state. Because I think that a lot of folks have an idea, as I said earlier, around what growth could look like, but they don't realize that the steps or the actions needed to do that may look a little different. And that's where we stay. So after that discovery process, we then move into some empathy. So really diving deeper into what the pain points are. And I think that a lot of the advising work that we do ends up a little bit like coaching, so looking at really just taking a deeper step back into saying, well, what's working about this for the business versus how's it working for you as an individual? And that's something that I encourage every entrepreneur and business owner to do with themselves, like through reflection, through journaling, just being able to say, taking the data and the story that's coming from the data versus what is working for you as an individual, to then map that out a bit further.
So, how do you help organizations unlock new revenue opportunities?
We do revenue. So, and that's where the real differentiation is around our practice as a marketing agency. As I said earlier, revenue is really tied to the story that you're telling. So when we think about the story that you're telling your customers, the story that you're telling your funders, the story that you're telling partners, it's really about taking an evaluative approach. And some folks have a hard time actually capturing those insights and those data points so that they can tell that story. When I think about how we're able to really tell and synthesize impact together, telling those stories comes down to really making sure that you have the systems in place to do that. We help businesses unlock those new revenue opportunities by actually taking a look, as you said earlier, that forensic look at what those systems look like. So that way we can say, hey, tell us what your gross impact looks like. How many folks are you serving? Where are those folks coming from? What communities are they coming from? What languages do they speak? What's the gross revenue of the clients and the folks that you serve? When we start to ask those questions and clients aren't able to tell us those answers, it starts to help them shift their mindset and their approach around thinking about what revenue needs to look like and what that storytelling needs to look like. And then from there, we help them map out those stories. So that way, when they're thinking about how they are pitching and selling and closing new business for themselves, they have what they need to be successful, so that they have those data points, right? Because as we know, folks love a data point. You got to have something to cite, like you've got to be able to talk about your business and talk about it from a numbers perspective so that folks know that you're taking it seriously. If you have these kind of loosey goosey answers, folks will start to question what's actually working and what's not. You've got to be hard about actually evaluating those processes. And that's what we hope folks do so that they can map that against the stories that they need to tell to get to new partnerships and new client opportunities.
Mhm. What's the biggest misconception about business consulting?
Hmm. I think for me, the biggest misconception about business consulting is that a lot of folks hire consultants as work for hire. So they're looking at consultants to come in and close internal capacity gaps, what we'd like to do as advisors is make sure that we're working with teams who are fishermen and they're looking to fish more efficiently. Because as we think about the internal gaps, unless you're going to bring on a team and then also onboard them, sustain that transition period as you're hiring new people, getting them up to speed to take on those responsibilities and manage those systems, there's often a bit of rubber friction point around what the initial onset of the project looks like versus the end output. And we want to make sure that we are solving for as much of that as possible by onboarding folks with the systems in mind at first. So that way we're working on the systems development. The systems are a part of your institutional knowledge. And then from there, what you do with those systems, you need to adapt and evolve them over time. So we've had some clients where we started with a type A, like a 1.0 version, knowing that they might need a 3.0 version, but you got to get through 1.0, right? You've got to be able to get through working with this initially, having the institutional knowledge and practice around this, and then see what the 2.0 can look like. Everyone wants the Bentley off top, but sometimes you got to start with a Buick. Sometimes you got to start with a Bronco. Sometimes you got to start with a Honda and then get towards that energy after actually working and understanding what some of the back-end systems management needs to look like, the costs associated with that. And those expenses can be costly if you make them too quickly. So taking the step of like really the low and slow approach and constantly evaluating what's working, what's not, is how we think about really transforming what business consulting can look like. So folks just don't see us as the guns for hire or the work for hire that is not helping them get to where they need to go, and they don't feel like they've gotten a good return on their investment.
Okay, let me give you an example. I come into your business, I'm seeking consulting, and I tell you that I just know I'm ready, and I want you to start me out on 3.0.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do if they're not ready for 3.0?
Yeah. I would have to say just that, based off of what we've seen. So based off the discovery, based off of the investments that you've made in these systems to date, and based off of your growth goals, what we'd actually recommend is that you start with, let's stick with like HubSpot as an example. So before you go with the bells and whistles version of HubSpot with the podcasting suite and with the sales emails, like let's just start you off with just actually using the CRM function. The free version versus like the starter pack is a great place to start, so that as you're building towards having the muscle and the memory and the knowledge around doing the 3.0 work, you have the opportunity to ramp up into that. And you can do that at any point. You can always upgrade your services at any time, but starting off with too much can also sometimes cloud the field of work that you need to really do initially to get to where you need to go. Let's just start by using the system. Let's just see how that works. And if it's working for you and the team, let's think about how many seats you need, how many, and what that aggregate cost is for the year, so that you can plan for that. And then you can start the next quarter, the next year off with that in mind. And you can also plan for what that needs to look like, because there's a cost of business associated with transitioning systems as much as there are starting new systems. And often we're trying to run and chew gum and walk and play ball all at the same time. And you can be running a lot without running much of anywhere. We want to prevent folks from doing that by taking that measured approach to what implementation needs to look like.
How do you tailor strategies for nonprofits versus corporations?
That's a great question. In terms of nonprofit strategy, nonprofits as 501c3s or maybe 501c6s for like some of the chambers of commerce, as charitable contributions and organizations, they have opportunities to do things in the market that small businesses may not. So when we think about some nonprofits, for example, who are fiscal sponsors, they leverage their 501c3 status to help businesses or other nonprofits bring efforts to light or bring in revenue that is grant dollars, for example. That's a little different from what it looks like as a small business. We tailor those strategies by really focusing on what the nonprofits need to be successful. So in terms of looking at board management, looking at their staffing infrastructure, looking at their strategic planning and thinking through what their challenges look like, we start with that. So if you don't have a strategic plan, okay, great. We can work on what a straw model would look like for this initial 6 to 12 months, but you have to have some goal in mind, and you have to have that goal measured against what your income looks like, what your partnerships look like, and what your business model looks like. Because nonprofits are businesses too. It's just a different classification, but it is a type of business. It's different for small businesses or corporations. Small business owners, as we know, are running a mile a minute. Larger businesses, they've got the institutional muscle, they've got maybe actuaries, they've got the risk management team. They're thinking about things much differently. They also approach risk much differently, right? So when they think about vetting and bringing in consultants, they've got a team of folks who is coming in and looking and evaluating proposals. And having worked in corporate, working with some supplier inclusion programs, it's nice to have an understanding of how folks are looking at businesses in that aspect and helping to convey that to business owners and nonprofits around making sure that, as I said earlier, you've got your data together. You've got to be able to tell a story. Folks are going to ask you those numbers. They want to know what's going on. They want to know what your impact metrics look like. They want to know how you're evaluating things, and making the time and the space to do that helps set you up so that you have the knowledge as much as the people who need your knowledge or to know what your program or your business is doing to see if they want to play ball with you. You have to have those things in mind, and you have to have that stuff developed. So it's easier to start doing it and to have the muscle memory around doing it than to not, because it'll save you a lot of headache down the line, a lot of headache down the line.
Reggie, I'm coming to Oak Lane, and look, I've got a lot of potential. I got a lot of good things going on. I'm not organized, but I'm just looking all toe up and raggedy.
Yeah.
What you gonna do to help me out?
We're gonna sit down. We're gonna start by just saying, you know what, it's okay. It's okay, because you know what, sometimes I think we all have, I'm not gonna speak for everybody, but most folks may have that drawer in the house that just kind of collects a bunch of stuff, or that room, or that, the trunk in the car. It's okay to not have the stuff together, but you have to have a game plan around what organization needs to look like for you. So starting by mapping those things out, just put all the stuff out there. It's interesting because I actually had to do this with my team. It's funny enough. So as a small business owner, I try different things. I've tried different softwares and subscriptions, and I was gathering these things like infinity stones. It's like, oh, $5.99 here, $9.99 there. It starts to add up. So I mapped it all out. And we were hosting a workshop, and one of my colleagues was like, Reggie, you need to show this map. I was like, I don't know if people need to see this much inside my kitchen just yet. I was like, hold on. It was really fascinating to work with my team, just to say, you know what? Let's just think about all the systems that we're using and how we're using them. Does everyone have access to these systems? Do we need all of these systems? Are these systems duplicative of one another? Being able to take a step back, even as a business owner, I do it. Like, we all have the opportunity that we need to be successful, but you got to make space for that. That's very different than bringing in new business, closing deals, staying compliant. It's just like, hey, here's a system I tried. We had a free trial. The trial lapsed. They've got your credit card information. Now they're charging you monthly. You don't see that money coming out. But if you're not getting the most out of that software or service, it's hurting you in the long run. You've got to be really, really dedicated and really on top of managing and keeping the thumb on what your business is doing, so that it's not running you, you're running it. And I would encourage that. I don't think that the raggedy toe up moment is one that anyone is unaware of, but it's just about saying, you know what, it's okay. The first thing to do is accept it. Great. And now we're going to come up with a game plan on how we can solve it together.
Can you share an example of leading organizational transformation?
So leading organizational transformation, an example. We have a nonprofit client that started out as a small business, actually. And this was an organization that I've been working with since 2020, 2021. The organization started out as a small business, and between the co-founders coming together and working to determine what this work and investment needed to look like in practice, was one that, after looking at their business model, they said, hey, you know what? This is how we've operated to date, but what could further investment and growth look like? It turned out that growth and development looked like needing to transform from a for-profit to a nonprofit entity. Why? Because some of the programs that they were looking to do, they were spending money externally on that fiscal sponsor that I mentioned. So someone else to help them bring in grant dollars. They wanted to focus on fundraising strategy and supporting workforce development initiatives. It made a lot of sense for them to become a nonprofit and helping to guide and shift them into that work. It looked like me stepping in as an advisor to really help unpack what these challenges look like, think about what the cost benefit analysis of being a nonprofit would look like, and then also to working with them on their fundraising strategy. So working with them to develop a fundraising tracking system and thinking about what all of that work could look like in practice has supported their efforts around upskilling and reskilling creative entrepreneurs. And it's something that I'm excited to see what other businesses can do in the market, because as it's funny, I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues the other day. Not every business needs to be a full-fledged business, the same way that not every nonprofit needs to be its own 501c3. It's okay for it to just be a fiscally sponsored project. I've worked with some businesses or some nonprofits actually that started out as fiscally sponsored projects, and they've now grown to becoming behemoths in the market, producing massive events and doing really great work. But it's all been about the founder or the individual and their stick-to-itiveness to their idea and their vision and taking that to task. You've got to be really clear on what you want to do. You've got to be really clear about what that needs to look like and how you need to do that work for it to be successful. And I think that folks who have that have it, and they've got it down, and they know how to ask for the help and the partnership that it takes to get there. Folks who are looking for that, they have the opportunity to partner and to bring folks in so that they can get to where they need to go. And there's no one wrong way or approach to do that, but it's about knowing yourself, knowing how you work, and knowing what the work needs to look like for you to achieve that vision. And those are some examples of what transformation has looked like organizationally for some of the folks that we've worked with.
So, how do you approach advising C-suite leaders?
I approach advising C-suite leaders.
Mhm.
The approach is it's interesting because C-suite leaders have a number of different demands on their time and on their capacity. So when we think about the average C-suite leader who might have anywhere from 6 to 10 direct reports, who's looking at up and down the organizational ladder, so thinking about either board management and whether that's a for-profit or a nonprofit board, so thinking about shareholder responsibilities, thinking about their board of trustees as a nonprofit or the board of directors. It comes down to making sure that the business leader has the support that they need internally, and that they also have the culture and the opportunity to really invest in what that transformation needs to look like. So we've had some clients who are looking to bring new solutions to market, and they know that they have team members who are adverse or a little stuck in a legacy mindset around what that looks like. And I'm like, well, how are you modeling what this type of business transformation needs to look like from a cultural perspective? Are you showing openness? Are you having those conversations with your peers in the C-suite? Are you empowering leaders up and down the chain to have those conversations with their direct reports to get to where you need to go? Those moments are really near and dear to my heart because it's something that I've seen modeled from folks in my time working in corporate America as well as working in nonprofits. Just being able to say, hey, you know what? I think back to maybe 2015, 2016, when we saw some of the first cuts in funding to support some of the nonprofits. We had really real conversations about what was happening and how we could sustain in that moment. Without that candor, without that type of radical candor, without bringing folks in and creating an environment that makes it a safe space for those types of moments and conversations, you don't often get the outputs that you're looking for. And you don't want folks tiptoeing around or moving from a place of scarcity or fear. You want to make sure that it's one that is really a culture of buy-in. And I think that a lot of C-suite leaders that we've worked with have had that opportunity to create that space. And I think a part of the work that we've helped them do is to see where, in conversations with some of their other members of their team, so doing different levels of engagement and different levels of discovery to unpack, here's what we're hearing from these folks directly that they might not have shared with a C-suite leader on a one-on-one basis. We can help close some of those feedback loops so that they have the intelligence that they know, like, oh, okay, this isn't hit where it needs to hit. Okay, got it. And now we can really pivot by coming up with some potential solutions and get that buy-in so that folks feel like they're a part of the decision-making and that they're at the table, not just having things handed to them in a way that they don't want to be a part of what that transformation can look like.
Can you tell us what makes C-suite leaders a little bit different than your regular clientele?
I think what makes C-suite leaders different than our regular clientele is that It's really, I think, one aspect of it is the people management. So I think because when you asked that question, I thought immediately about a small business owner. I'm like, you know what? A small business owner has to manage all of these different pieces. I know I have to manage all these different pieces. The difference is when you're managing and having to motivate people, managing and motivating people is very different, right? Like people, we all come with our lived experiences. We all come with the things that we wear in our 9 to 5s as well as the stuff that we wear in our 5 to 9. So the stuff outside of business that's happening in life impacts how we show up at work. And when we think about intrinsic motivation, when we think about how we're getting people on board to do things, people need to see themselves as a part of that work, as a part of that ecosystem, as a part of that world. And C-suite leaders have to manage that. It's walking a tightrope in a different kind of capacity because you're trying to balance the business objectives with the people as well. And the people are the ones who are helping you execute and do the work on a day-to-day basis. So how we think culturally about what leadership looks like and what adaptive leadership needs to look like, being able to be nimble, being able to respond, but keep your eyes on the prize and keep your eyes on the business objectives. It's hard and it's not easy. And I think that what I've seen done really well in most of the environments that I've worked in is having those executives who are willing to sponsor new and innovative ideas, who are willing to raise and elevate the concerns of members of the team and really sit and work through those challenges and create those spaces for learning so that everyone sees that it's safe to challenge ideas and come up with new solutions in a way that is productive and in a way that is really that really contributes to what the overarching goal of the division or the company looks like. But that takes time and that takes space, and it's not one that just comes out of nowhere. You've got to make it, and you've got to make it each and every day.
Mhm. So, so as you go through and you got these particular, you got a lot of C-suite leaders that you deal with. Can you tell us, like, what does the diversity look like, and are you doing a lot of consulting on the diversity side when it comes to that?
And when you say diversity, do you mean around like diversity, equity, and inclusion, or like the diversity of the leaders themselves?
Both.
Both. Okay, so I'd say we work with a number of leaders who are Black, Brown, who come from marginalized LGBTQ plus communities, and we also work with leaders who are of any race. We don't have any preclusions around working with folks of any race or ethnicity. I think one of the things um, that makes this conversation really special is that we're at a time now in our nation's history where we've got leaders who are trying to navigate a lot of external pressures around what inclusion needs to look like, around what access to opportunity needs to look like. And I think we're really fortunate to support a number of C-suite individuals and business owners around what that work looks like in practice, while also knowing that diversity is really our strength. So how we get new experiences, different voices, and then also different opinions into the room. It makes our solutions richer. It makes our outputs better because we're getting lenses on things that we wouldn't have had we not had those folks in the room. I'm really excited to see what diversity and leadership can look like as we think about the growth and evolution of our society. I know that there were some recent reports out around it was a shocking statistic around, I believe, 300,000 Black women leaving the workforce, for example. And I think about like what that means in terms of the next generation and the current generation of leaders, what that means for Black and Brown and other women and folks who are identifying in that space around what leadership looks like. We can't keep doing business as we've always done it. We've got to keep our eyes focused on what growth and evolution looks like. So as a diverse leader, working to run a business and working to empower folks, I get to be a bit of the change that I'm looking to see in the market, while also making sure that as we're working with individuals, that we're learning from them and also challenging them to make room for others as well. And it's been a real privilege to have the opportunity to do that, particularly in this time and season of my life.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What's the most rewarding part of being a business advisor?
Hmm. I think the most rewarding part about being a business advisor is being able to have a client get it. Like like when clients have those aha moments when it's like, oh, it's like, I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to have a gotcha moment where it's just like, God, I told you that this wasn't going to work. And they're like, what? It's like, no, that's not for me. What's the most rewarding part of being a business advisor? I think for me, what it is the mindset shift. And it's funny. I was talking with some of our clients over the summer, and I remember I almost got emotional, Charles. I was just like, are you serious? I was like, finally, after working with them for about 6 months, hearing the difference in their approach to talking about their business structure, their challenges, and what their next opportunities needed to look like in the market. I saw that the light switch had clicked. The light bulb was on. They're like, no, actually, here's how we're going to think about this, and this is what this needs to look like for us to be successful. And I was like, who are y'all? Now this is what I'm talking about. And it makes me proud to be able to say that we support folks in that effort, because you don't want to create a dependency for your clients where they can't work without you. That's that same methodology of just fishing for folks.
Right.
I'm not just looking to fish for you. I'd much rather you be able to fish, and then we can go out and fish together, and we can all capture more fish when we know that we have the tools and the systems to be successful in doing that. That work is something that a lot of programs talk about doing, but a lot of entrepreneurs need additional support and handholding that comes with cultural responsiveness. So being able to talk about like trauma and money in Black communities, for example. I know what some of those things look like from lived experience. Folks on my team have other experiences that help them show up better for some of our clients than my lived experience. And that's okay. But it's really about us being the phone a friend, the bat signal in a time of need, while also making sure that we've got the utility belt ready to go. So it's like, here are a couple tools, here's some resources, and here's what you can do. How's this working for you? If it's not, okay, great. Well, where can we point you to get you to where you need to be successful? And it's the light bulb moments when folks get it. And when you see that they get it, it's like a symphony, right? It's like all the pieces are playing at the right time, and they've got everything going and moving. And I'm excited to have more of that work happen as we continue to work with our clients over time as well.
So, how do you integrate equity and inclusion into business strategy?
How to integrate equity and inclusion in 2025 into business strategy. Charles, you're asking the great questions tonight. No, I think equity and inclusion is something, when I think about the racial wealth gap, and when I think about how we talk about equity in communities that have not gotten their fair share of the market, that have been promised things from local and state and federal governments and politicians that have not come to really fruition. It's really about making sure that as we're thinking about what equal opportunity looks like, that we have opportunity designed with those folks in mind. So think about folks who are neurodiverse, thinking about folks who come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, and how do we make sure that we have opportunities that meet them where they're at, and how we can help them grow to scale. I think about a number of different initiatives, at least here in Massachusetts, that have passed where, at least at the state level, the Healy Driscoll administration had moved to remove the college degree requirement from state jobs. So that way, in lieu of having a 4-year degree, if you have opportunity where you've worked in the market, but you might not have that piece of paper, you can show how X amount of years of work experience validate that you have what you need to be successful to take on the opportunity to get your foot in the door. That's what equity looks like to me. That's what inclusion looks like to me. Being able to see folks for who they are, for what they bring to the table, and being able to dive deeper into how their skill sets can help support your business or grow it over time. It's about taking chances on people, and it's about being willing to allow folks to make mistakes and learn. I know that there are a number of programs really working around carceral justice, around challenging recidivism in the market, and making sure that individuals who have experienced incarceration for drug crimes, which are now legal, we're not going to talk about drug scheduling or get too far into the weeds on that, but there's plenty of opportunity where folks could just really use a second chance and use that phone a friend and use that mentor or that sponsor to say, hey, you know what? I think this person would be really great over here. Why don't we give them a shot? And let people take the shot, and see what it looks like. There are plenty of opportunities, but we have to be willing to make them available for others where they might not have been available for us. And I'm excited to see how Oak Lane as a business can do that for other folks, as we talked about mentorship as well.
Wow, what's interesting about that is I know when Pennsylvania first did that, they did that when Josh Shapiro was elected
Yeah.
governor. And when they did that, I mean, things took off where there were like plenty of jobs for people to get, where the earnings were like just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so to know now that Massachusetts is one of those states that's doing that, I think there's a couple of other states that are doing that, but I had no idea that they were doing that in Massachusetts. I mean, there's got to be some difference there in the scalability, as to what people are trying to do now. So, are you seeing more and more entrepreneurs that are starting businesses that you're actually having the opportunity to work with?
Mm. When I think about a number of the entrepreneur and the business support organizations here in the Commonwealth, I think that um, I would need to look back at the rates of new businesses opening. I know that in some of the research that I'd done, at least looking on the national level, we had seen a large uptick in what uh, business open rates had looked like at the top of the pandemic when we had all of this additional support coming from the federal government around like the payroll protection program and helping folks sustain in that moment. We saw a bit of a decline shortly after that, after some of those pandemic related funds started to expire. But I think that what I'd love to say is that I think that there's a lot of opportunity here in the Commonwealth. And one of the things that, from my time working in communications, is that we say it's like, can we make wealth common in the Commonwealth? Like, can we not have this game of the haves and the have nots? And when we think about equity, when we think about ownership, being able to start a business, being able to grow a business, and being able to scale a business look very different. You can start it, great. Do you have what it takes to grow it? Sure. What does scale look like? Scale looks like longevity. Scale looks like years, a decade or two. It takes time. It takes a lot of time. And when I think about the amount of training and the amount of support that folks have to do that, similar to some of the programs around entrepreneurship, around education, I know that like what we saw when they worked to make community college free in Massachusetts, there was such an influx because so many people had been cost prohibitive from actually getting education that once the doors are open, like folks ran it up. I think about what that could look like for entrepreneurship, where it's like if we make more of these opportunities available, could we really sustain and grow like 10x grow what entrepreneurship looks like in the market and what those type of partnerships look like? But then, we're at a time in a season where with things at the federal government, there are such challenges around what these programs look like because of these funding cuts and because of these other moves. It makes the sustainability of what the public private partnership looks like challenging. So that's my long way of saying I would love to see what more businesses starting and sustaining and scaling could look like. And that's going to require something shifting in the market, primarily from a legislative perspective. And that's not just at the state level. I think that's also at the federal level.
What trends in market positioning excite you most today?
Hmm. I think in terms of market positioning trends, I think, we are the generation and the day that we're in has so much opportunity at its hand. We have the most resources of any generation prior. When I think about what are we at Gen Beta now? I think we might still I think we just hit Gen Beta. I know that, from between Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, we're looking at 4 or 5 generations in the workforce, 4 or 5 generations of experience. And then we're also looking at a time where we have all of these new tools, all of these new systems to be successful. But it really requires stewardship. And as I mentioned earlier, it requires literacy. You've got to know how to weed out a deep fake from a real piece of news. The same way that you got to be able to know fake news from something that you got to be cite your sources, check your facts, be okay knowing that you might not know everything and just name like I actually don't know this, and that's okay. I'm gonna circle back after I've checked on that stat really quickly. Um, I think that those are some things in terms of market positioning that make entrepreneurship really exciting for folks. But the gig economy and the way it works and the ways in which work folks are working now is really working. I think, in my opinion, it's not just a means to an end, but it's working for a creative outlet. Folks are taxed at work, they're tired, and they're looking for opportunities to do things that excite them. Not every hobby needs to be monetized. I'll also say that as well. It's okay to just garden and paint and play the saxophone if that's what your jam is. And not everything needs to be a business. But if you're looking to get your share of the market, you have a time like now to be able to do it. And you have the systems to do it. Vibe coding, as an example, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like where you're able to use systems like Claude or Perplexity and actually generate entire websites in code in mere minutes. And that's not the same as needing to know how to code on like a front stack, a full stack, or a front end or a back end developer basis as it once was. But that also doesn't replace the utility of actually knowing the foundational skill sets of computer science and knowing how to break things apart and put them back together when they go wrong. Because these systems, like these GPTs and these other systems, they're flawed, they're imperfect, and they say that disclaimer at the bottom line of all of the things that they say, like can make errors, please double check. But there's a lot of opportunity at the end of the day.
So how do you balance short-term wins with long-term sustainability?
In terms of balancing short-term wins with long-term sustainability, I think short-term wins, I think about it. I think I'll use a basketball reference here. I think about it kind of like the court is in a basketball game. Like the layups are cute when you're just trying to get on the board, and they can also be the points that help you make or break the game, right? Like not everything needs to be a three-pointer.
Right.
Not everything needs the layups do plenty. Sometimes you get fouled, you hit that free throw, you can get where you need to go. But you've got to be able to hit all of those different types of shots.
Right.
And you've got to fail through what those, like what those challenges look like in the market. And I say all of this to say, because I went to plenty of sports camp in my younger days. And I think about what it was like not being the best person shooting from the line, but maybe being better at a layup, or having those moments where I got the free throw or the 3-pointer. I'm like, now how do I keep doing that again? Right? Like, it's like, how did I get that one, but I'm not hitting them consistently when the pressure's on? You got to be able to take a step back and say, okay, you know what? I can't rush this. I got to have the right conditions. I've got to be okay with breathing and not letting all these other stressors get ahead of me. I've just got to be able to sit, breathe, and know that I've got the shot and know that I can do this.
Yes.
Those short-term wins help you build towards, in my opinion, the long-term sustainability. Being able to start a business at all and have someone believe in my skill set to the point where as a solopreneur, I could do some work was a short-term win. Building on that now as a consultant, as a founder with a team of folks that also believe in the vision and the mission of this work, want to work with me, trust that we actually all have what we need to be successful, and we're now doing business together. As I said earlier, it means the world to me because it's the validation that not only what we're doing is needed in the market, but that folks understand that they are really the key. They are really the gems. They are really the jobs that they're looking for, with the right partnerships and with the right opportunities. And they're taking chances on me the same way that they're taking chances on themselves and doing the work that we're doing together. And that's how you get to long-term sustainability. It's building on those bricks, one brick at a time, one shot at a time, seeing what sticks, taking those losses, and closing those feedback loops so that you can improve your game.
Let's transition over to your career journey and leadership.
Okay.
Can you tell us how did your time at Blue Cross Blue Shield shape your leadership style?
So it's interesting. So during my time at Blue Cross, I was really excited because I started out working in state government and regulatory affairs. So I was working as a part of the regulatory affairs team, looking at different aspects of what state regulations meant for the company's membership. Having the chance to report to corporate counsel, I was tracking a lot of different hearings, and I'm like, looking at things like mobile integrated healthcare, telemedicine, and being able to report on these issues and hear what other folks were saying and how it impacted the company's membership was exciting. That's also where I got my initial exposure to design thinking. So, in working to train and work with different associates across different areas of the business, I had the chance to see what other folks were dealing with in the call center or in health and medical management or in corporate strategy. And that's before I actually moved over to working on the innovation team. And I was able to do that training with the company to train other associates on how they could use design thinking in their work. As we talk about mentorship and sponsorship, I had a former senior leader that I'd worked with who saw that my skill set and work in the nonprofit ecosystem and in community was really aligned with what design thinking looked like. And I didn't have access to that language at the time. I didn't know that it's called popular education from a community organizing a community basis. I didn't know that there was an apples to apples comparison around what a skill set around falling in love with a problem, coming up with some ideas, creating a prototype of what those ideas, testing and closing feedback loops could look like. But that shot gave me the opportunity to know how to talk a bit more about my work and to talk about my skill set and how to help others do the same. While managing partnerships for the Innovation Center, it was really exciting to have the opportunity to work and build the external relationships needed to bring new partnerships into a physical space, which was very different for a health insurer at the time, and to learn about what the investments needed to sustain those things look like. It's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of buy-in that's needed. The same way as we talk about cultural transformation, it was a really big cultural shift for the company at the time, and I was excited to have a chance to be a representation of what that looked like in action while learning. And it gave me a really great. It gives me real peace and excitement to know that I was able to help shepherd that work at that time, and that work still stands and exists in different ways today.
Mm. So tell us, what lessons did you learn from your work in government affairs?
Mm. In terms of working in government affairs, it's funny. I worked in government affairs at Blue Cross. I did work in political communications during the height of the first Trump administration into the Biden administration with the pandemic. And I think I look back on that period of time fondly, and I also look back on it for what the challenges were associated with it. In working in government affairs at the height of the movement for Black Lives, the Black Lives Matter movement, we saw a lot of investment in diverse programs and diverse experiences, really working to call for equity and to call for justice and supporting diverse communities. And I think we all know what we've seen as a part of a lot of the rollbacks of those initiatives at the top of 2025. I think for me, what I learned is that, we have to have the political will to do things, and the political will is based off of people. These ideologies that policies can't be changed or that we can't make progress happen are just categorically false. They are 100% within our power to change, but we have to be brave enough to call for it. Making space for that when you've been marginalized, when you might not see yourself represented in what leadership or what the folks sitting at the table, the decision makers are doing, doesn't mean that our voices aren't needed there, doesn't mean that our voices aren't valid there, and it doesn't mean also that we don't have voices. I hate when folks say that, we've given voices to people. No, everyone has a voice. It's about access to how, with the megaphone, the mic, to amplify that voice to the people that need to hear it. And that's what I think excites me most about policy, even though in a time like this, it can feel really difficult to believe in government. It can feel really difficult to believe that things can change. Things can change, but we have to be the ones to change them. Elected officials represent our voices. Full stop. They represent our voices. How do we make sure that we're holding those folks accountable? And how do we make sure that the things that we're looking for from government are things that are really happening? We've got to put the right people in the right seats to get there. And that takes everyone being involved to the best of their ability, and tell a friend to tell a friend, make sure that we're making it all happen.
So, what did your role at Massachusetts Budget and Policy Center influence your approach to communications? How did that happen?
During my time at Mass Budget, so as a think tank working to advance racial and economic justice through tax policy, you can imagine that talking about state fiscal and budget policy, folks kind of glaze over a little bit. Um, it was interesting, right? Because we worked on some campaigns that were talking about things like the Millionaire Tax and the Fair Share Amendment, where it's like, oh, taxing the wealthy can help us fund public education and transportation. I think everyone loves the benefits of public education and transportation, right? Like, I think having well-resourced schools, having roads that aren't chewing up your undercarriage or giving you, a flat tire with a pothole makes a lot of sense, right? Doesn't convey to folks when you're thinking about tax policy. But taxes are shared investments, and they're what we all contribute into this larger pot that helps us make those investments possible. people need to know that. But because a lot of these things feel intangible to folks, until you feel the impacts of them, you don't really want to play with it. You don't really want to play in the sandbox. So being able to, much like having those aha moments with small business owners, being able to actually tell people like, it's only 4 pennies on the dollar, and it's only for people who make this much money. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'd be down to support them. Like, yeah, but why were you so averse to it without having all of the facts? And it's
Mm,
because policy is intentionally difficult. It seems inaccessible, and it's by design. I don't know if you've ever gotten one of those ballot referendum mailers where you got all the technical language of the bill or the ballot initiative on the back, and it's like a yes vote means this, a no vote means
yes.
that. Helping to synthesize and distill that information down to say, actually, this is what you need to know. It meant a lot to me because it helped people from our communities understand, like, okay, I got this, and now I'm willing to make an educated decision. And I'm not trying to sway your decision one way or another, but making sure that people are educated and have the opportunity to have the conversation. It can at least have discourse amongst themselves about it.
Right.
That's a part of what success would look like for me in that work, because it could be really intangible. Changing public opinion around taxes, when I'm like, I don't show of hands who's seeing and feeling it in 2025. It can be dicey, right? But we know what well-resourced schools look like. We know what good public transportation looks like. We know what roads and bridges that aren't falling apart look like. And we want that for everyone. At least I would hope that we would all like to get somewhere safely and make sure that kids have meals and the resources that they need to get through school and matriculate accordingly. I would think that we all want that. If we don't, we can have a separate conversation as a sidebar. But if we want to have society do well, we all have to come together and kind of share in what those costs look like. And that's something that it takes time. It takes time and it takes effort. And I'm really appreciative of folks who continue to do that research and dive deep into those issues and to make that information plain for folks where it typically isn't available for folks just to access on a day-to-day basis.
So, what did you take away from fundraising strategy work at the Transformative Culture Project?
In terms of fundraising strategy, so TCP, the Transformative Culture Project, was the evolution of the first job that I mentioned. So, when I started out as a young person working to increase the diversity of voices in the mainstream media, I didn't know that holding press conferences at the State House or working to produce video content with other young people to counter these narratives would turn into a business model that would then work to employ young people on a sustained basis around actually doing deeper video production for other clients. So in working through we had an engagement that we worked through where we had a 24-month accelerator where my boss has actually nominated me to pitch the business model. And I remember the shock and the dismay that I had around them saying, like, Reggie, you're going to do this. I'm like, what? I was like, you want me to represent this? Why me? I'm like, what? They're like, no, you're going to do it. It was one of the most transformative experiences of my life, though, because it gave me, I was one of the only people of color, and I think I was also the youngest person to pitch our business model that year, and that having the chance to really sit down, work through what donor prospecting looked like. So being able to map out who a donor is, their interests, how much they're giving, what their average range of gifts look like, what types of programs they support, how to have conversations with those donors. So talking about our impact metrics, where we're looking to grow as a business, as a nonprofit, how we're looking to scale, and being able to help impart those opportunities on young people as well. So bringing young folks to shoot, being able to interview mayoral candidates, gubernatorial candidates, and fundraise around that work. It gave me the opportunity to really see that we have true access to the resources that we need when we tell the right stories, when we talk to the right people, and when we keep persisting. Because not every grant you're going to get, and that's okay. Funders change their priorities all of the time, but being able to keep your pulse on the beat around those types of things, your beat on the pulse around those types of things, and being able to say, okay, great, and you can have transparent and candid conversations with folks. It helps you develop the real relationships that will say, hey, you know what? Our priorities are changing, but we can recommend you to someone over here. Or, you know what, we think that actually it might be better if you do this. And philanthropy is looking to see a return on their investment as well. These grants, just because they're giving you this money doesn't mean that they don't want to see where what you're doing with it. It is actually the space where they want to see what you're doing with it. Being able to be really hard about what that data and evaluation looks like so that you can tell that story, so that you can get to the next check, the next leg up, the next partnership. Um, it means a lot for me in the context of what business looks like for me now, because it's what I think about and what I impart with our clients around revenue operations. Like, sales is great, but sales and grants, they go hand in hand. You know, it's just a different type of revenue generation. You just think about it differently because you're a different structure of business. But small businesses get grants too. You know, you still got to apply and tell those stories and have those impact metrics at the ready. It's not just like, here's money in a candy shop, go. It's like, you've got to be able to show what you're going to do with it and make sure that you're not fumbling the bag once you get it.
So let's transition over to Black history. When we chatted, when I asked you who were the most influential persons in your life and career in Black history, you told me it was your mother, George Washington Carver, and Martin Luther King Jr. Can you tell us how has your mother influenced your career and values?
Hmm. Anyone who knows me knows that my mother is the most important, one of the most important people in my life, just where my life started. My mother, as an entrepreneur, has always made a way out of no way, you know, and she's not alone in doing that. She's had a village, my two aunts, my grandmother, my family, who have all supported us. But in terms of access to opportunity, whenever something needed to happen, my mother made a way to make it happen. When I think about her creativity, the spark and the joy that she imparts upon others, and what she enjoys as a business owner around making women feel beautiful and making women feel that they have a safe space to be seen and to be heard and to come on and come into a space and take off the mask that they have to wear around expectations for folks, is something that I think makes me a good business advisor, because I worked with her in those elements, in those environments. So learning about what care and what responsibility looks like as a service provider was something that I couldn't imagine having learned somewhere else as much as I learned it in being her child. So I really appreciate having that experience and having that to reflect on. In terms of George Washington Carver, so thinking about light bulbs, like being able to create the filament, to create the light bulb for like what we see now, as you know, now we get LED lights and all these other things. When I think about just being able to take the materials and to innovate out of something that wouldn't have conventionally be seen as an opportunity, and for it to completely revolutionize and change the way that we operate in our society, is something that it was really inspiring for me, because it was one of the first times I remember a historical figure, particularly a Black man, being seen and doing something. From my early days in school, like learning about that was something that it stood out to me. And MLK, as you know, his calls for freedom and for justice. As someone who, I attended Morehouse College, I have deep love and appreciation for all the ways in which he called for, you know, threats to justice anywhere being a threat to justice everywhere, and the times in which we live in, work in today's society, being able to keep the tenets around being able to think about reaching that mountaintop, and being able to think about what reaching a true point of equity and parity in our society, and being able to lean into those dreams and lean into those values that he espoused, is really a challenge and a rallying cry that we all need to keep front and center, particularly as we move into these next 3 to 4 years of this administration and whatever life looks like beyond that.
So, what lessons from George Washington Carver resonate with you as an entrepreneur?
I think for me as an entrepreneur, I think being able to fail at things. So, you know, you don't, when I think back on that particular journey for George Washington Carver, I don't think that, if, and correct me if I'm wrong, or, you know, keep me honest, but it wasn't, the light bulb just wasn't created overnight. You know, you have to be able to take a couple of stabs at it and take a couple of tries at it and keep innovating, keep pushing forward. Being able to stick to that idea and stick to what the potential could be is something that I really take from that particular instance. And when I think about what that can do in terms of transforming society, I can't imagine what he would have to say about what his invention then is doing for folks now, and what it has done over the lifespan of its time, and how it's continuing to innovate and continuing to make new space and new opportunity possible for folks. And that's something that I think every entrepreneur needs to know and to hear is that, like you might have the seed, you might create the idea or the product, but how it lives beyond us is what those long-term sustainability, the short-term win versus the long-term sustainability that we talked about earlier looks like. And it can live well beyond you and evolve well beyond what you might think is possible if you bring it to market.
Last question. How do you see Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision reflected in your work?
Mm. I think in my work, I'm not going to say that I woke up and I had a dream about being a small business owner. I'm not going to say that because I didn't. It's funny. I wanted to become a diplomat. I like languages. I like helping people. I like working with people. And I think that that's part of what I do now. I think that, I just do it in a different lens and in a different lane than what I initially imagined doing. When I think about all the ways in which Dr. King practiced peaceful nonviolence, practice showing up and practice really creating space to challenge the paradigms of what society looked like at a time where it was unpopular, at a time where Black and brown bodies were put on the line physically around doing that. I think that in showing up and in daring to do something like run a small business and daring to help people at a time such like this is an act of resistance. And it's something that I feel really grateful for all of the folks like Dr. King, like Malcolm X, like Shirley Chisholm, like James Baldwin, Bayard Rustin, all of the civil rights leaders who have come before us and who have laid the groundwork for what modern day investment in civil rights and opportunity look like so that we can continue pushing forward to make access to opportunity, to make capital, to make wealth equity something that is truly an opportunity in our lifetime happen. I'm grateful for that. And I think that that is a dream that now I can say that I can truly walk in and lean in after, starting this business and being where I am today.
Wow. So, in closing, are there any words of wisdom and encouragement that you could leave for our audience? You can tell them how they can connect with you via your social media, how they can come to your website, the works that you do, and the things that they can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of things that I would impart is that one, rest is resistance. Burnout is real. I know I've experienced it. I think that a lot of what's happened over the past decade in news and in media has been really exhausting. So, protect yourselves, take care of yourselves. Rest is truly resistance. We can't pour from empty cups. And that's something that I've definitely been leaning more into in my entrepreneurial journey, making space for my health and wellness, working on it truly as a wraparound for myself has been really helpful. I think that if you're interested in starting a business or starting your entrepreneurial journey, think about what that looks like for you and how you need to sustain it. Not everyone wants to start a business full time. Some people are okay with a side hustle. Some people are okay leaning and taking that leap of faith. You got to see what makes sense for you and think about what the systems and the supports are that you need to be successful in doing that and make a game plan around it. So if you have the runway, take the runway. If you have the support, take the support, ask for help. I'll say that again, ask for help. Actually, one thing from fundraising, they say if you ask for advice, you get money. If you ask for money, you get advice. So thinking through what you're actually looking through and asking for can be really helpful. And then lastly, keeping the change. I think that there are so many new opportunities in the market. What things look like today may look completely different tomorrow. But if you show up and you're willing to play ball and you're willing to be at least in the conversation, you might get everything that you ask. You might get everything that you want that you might not have asked for had you not been there. So keep showing up to the best of your ability while making sure that you're resting and making sure that you're being persistent about what that looks like. And in terms of connecting with us at Oak Lane, you can find out more on our website, which is Oak Lane, ACSA as in Apple, C as in Charlie, S as in Sam.com. Our social media accounts are on there on LinkedIn and on Instagram. And then also all of my information is on there as well. And I'm happy to share anything for follow-up with the show notes as well in terms of staying connected with people. We'd love to connect. We're looking for new partners nationally, locally, who are looking to partner on business transformation and partner on making sure that entrepreneurs and social impact leaders have what they need to be successful in the market.
Oh, I want you to know this. There is one question here. Well, there's one comment that's here. in the chat, and it's from Rashad Hilton, and he just says good evening. I'll put that on the screen.
Okay. Good
And
evening.
so, well, I want to tell you, I want to thank you for your time, for being here with us this evening. This was truly a great show. And I tell you, I didn't get a chance to go through the whole gamut of all the wonderful questions that I have, but I got to tell you that this was truly wonderful. And I guess, we could have had this discussion for hours. I want you to know it was really great. And I appreciate you so much. And I think for the audience here, as you just listened to what Reggie was just stating, you know, if it's entrepreneurship that you want to do, then, if you've got the things in place that you want to get this done, then there's nothing to fail but to try. As long as you try, and if that's what you want to do, I say do it.
Amen.
He was just saying, just do it. But if you don't try, then you'll never know. And so I just wish each and every last one of you much success for those for the things that you decide that you want to do. But just remember, as he also stated early in the show, that entrepreneurship, that's a slow process. So you've got to be ready for all the struggles in the beginning in order to get to that success. Because I don't think many of us can say that instantaneously we jumped off the bat and whoop, we're successful. That's not the way that works. But it's not a discouragement, but just letting you know that it is some work that has to be done. For all of you that are listening and watching us on all the 8 channels that we stream on, for those of you that are on the YouTube channels, if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, I'm asking if you would please support us by subscribing and also enabling all notifications so that every show that we do, you will get the opportunity to see the show live. You'll also have the opportunity to go back and watch many of the other shows that have been recorded, and you can get those valuable lessons that those guests have left for each and every individual to get some learning from and some motivation and inspiration. For those of you that have not yet joined our community, please join our community. There's lots and lots of good things there as it's growing because you're able to watch the show there. You're also able to um, get your copy of the magazine there once you have subscribed initially. You're also able to do posts there. You're able to network there. For those of you that are entrepreneurs that are there already, if there are people that you're looking for, you're able to do those posts there as well. We're still working on the community and just want you guys to know that as you're doing all those things, we do have a point system where eventually we are going to put up, the things that you're able to redeem those points for, where you will be rewarded for those. And also, and finally, just want you guys to know that as we're going into the next year, 2026, we are going to be going 5 days a week because we're adding a new segment. We're adding Final Word Fridays. Final Word Fridays is going to be a wonderful, wonderful show where we will have panelists of 3 people that we will actually talk about hot topics. You'll also be right in the midst of happy hour, so you'll be able to have yourself a cocktail as well. But we want you to maintain civility while also discussing those hot topics that you like to talk about, where everyone has the ability to comment, and also some things that I'm sure that people out in the audience would definitely want to chime in on as they're able to still send their questions and comments as well. I want you all to have a wonderful and great evening. Come back and see us tomorrow here on America in Black and White, where we will continue to color conversations on the canvas of America. I'm your host, Charles King. You all have a great evening. Thank you again, Reggie. And we definitely got to have you back, as a matter of fact. I'll send you some dates for our next season where we definitely want you back.